a quick introduction. My name is Henry. I'm the founder of Smithery. I'm also part of the MCP steering committee as a member. And before Smithery, I was actually building my previous startup called Jenny AI. So, today I want to give a high-level overview of kind of the problem space within MCP because it's such a new space. I think there are more problems than solutions right now. And also a little bit of an origin story of perhaps like how I came about to MCP myself and Smithery. So to start off, at my last startup, Jenny, we built an AI academic assistant, and we helped around 1 million researchers write papers more efficiently and better. But there was one thing from my experience at Jenny that kept bothering me. So this was one student that showed me her AI workflow. It looks something like this. She had 7 windows open. She had ChatGPT on this one corner here. She had Semantic Scholar. She has Otero for reference management. It was a complete mess. And she was copying and pasting between these different windows in order to achieve her automated workflow or AI-powered workflow. And when I saw this, I felt like this couldn't be the way we achieve, sort of autonomous agents that are practically useful, right? And honestly, this was a problem that wasn't unique to academics. Every knowledge worker out there is somewhat trapped in the same copy and paste hell, because while models are getting smarter, they're not really connected to the world. So if you remember the ArcAGI challenge, which I think went somewhat viral towards the end of last year, but is still ongoing. This is a challenge that's meant to challenge the IQ of an LLM, like how good it is at generalizing. And for a long time, this challenge has been sort of undefeated, at least the ArcAGI 1 version of the challenge. But at the end of last year, O3 came out, and at least the most expensive version of O3 was able to completely destroy this benchmark, or the first version of this benchmark. So it's very clear that models are getting smarter, right? They're continually getting smarter. They're beating these math benchmarks. But what we have, the problem we're facing, like today and also in the last couple of years, is that while models are getting smarter, we're not seeing a lot of AI agents in the wild that are being deployed. And that's what I like to call sort of Claude's paradox. It's on the one hand, we have all these models that are getting better and becoming stronger reasoners. But on the other hand, we don't have a lot of practically useful agents in the world. And the central problem with this is that intelligence has been somewhat disembodied. They're not connected with the real world. Now, before we kind of step into MCP, I want to kind of go over one common rebuttal against MCP, right? It's like, why don't we just use a computer use or operator, right? Because these kind of systems can expose a few sort of actions to the LLM, and the LLM can, in theory, do everything. Or why don't we just give the LLM access to a code interpreter? It could just write its own functions and do API calls, right? But I think the problem with this approach when applied to everything is that it's incredibly slow. And it's kind of like this picture here where you have a robot, you build a robot to like turn pages in a book. But what we really want is computers that can read the digital text, right? Which is a lot more efficient. So I think the computer use and these type of systems are great as a fallback for legacy system, and they're incredibly useful. But it can't be the dominant way AI agents interact with the real world. And I think more broadly, right? We have been kind of focused a lot on operator computer use, perhaps in the towards the end of last year and maybe earlier this year, right? I think this fixation perhaps neglects how the ecosystem will actually unfold. I think the ecosystem will be a co-evolution where we have, on the one hand, models are getting smarter. They're being able to use tools in a more human-like way. And on the other hand, we have AI native software emerging, right? Software becoming more AI compatible. And I think that's where MCP comes in. So I think by the end of last year, everyone from startups to major labs recognized the problem that we have models are getting smarter, but they're not really like connected to the real world. Everyone from startups to major labs recognized this. And I think that kind of prompted Anthropic in late 2024 to introduce the MCP. Now, I won't go into details of MCP because this is the MCP summit, and a lot of people here are already familiar with MCP. But if you haven't heard of it, in one line, I would say it's an open standard where AI agents can talk to services using a common language. And when Anthropic released MCP last year, I was pretty excited. It's around November time, and that kind of prompted me into starting Smithery. The cool thing about MCP is that it's not just a traditional integration. I think like MCP kind of opens up a new category of software, which we like to call AI native services. And the difference between MCP and sort of a traditional software is that it's kind of designed from the ground up and made for AI agents. So yes, in theory, it is a subset of an API, right? But really, when people are building these services, they have agents as the customer in mind, right? As the user in mind. And so like you can't just like port an API into an MCP without a lot of thought. Yeah, so within months of MCP's launch, thousands of developers started building AI native services. At Smithery, we're seeing about 30 new deployments every single day. So agents now finally have a chance to access databases. They can browse the web, manipulate files, send emails, and do all sorts of different things thanks to MCPs. So now we have two ingredients solved, right? Models are getting smarter. Now we have a protocol that models can talk to everything else. So we're essentially done, right? AGI achieved. Well, I think not quite. There are a bunch more problems here that we had to figure out. So I think MCP really opened the sort of Cambrian explosion of AI native services. And we can now begin to build all these services designed for AI agents. But even with a protocol and models getting smarter, I think we still have a bunch of problems that we have to solve in this ecosystem. So first, if you are a person using, if you are a user of MCP, I would say you're probably facing what I like to call a quality roulette. So you have these lists of MCPs. It's pretty hard to find good quality MCPs. You don't know where to discover them. Probably you go before Smithery, you probably went on GitHub to try to look for a good MCP. Luckily, the MCP team, the committee, is working on an official registry to make this process a lot easier. But there's still an overall open question of how do we assign reputation and how do we determine if a service is high quality or not. And in addition to that, there's no way to really know if a particular service fits into your agent's needs. The next problem I want to highlight is that MCP has been pretty hard to install up until recently with Streamboy HTTP. You had this like 5-step process involving JSONs and involving pasting code almost, and this is probably not accessible to a lot of non-technical users. So packaging is definitely a problem with MCPs. And once you are able to get your MCP in a good package, you might just be faced with an unsecured MCP. So this is one MCP I found where in sort of the package JSON, there is a suspicious looking URL that's replacing a particular package that I installed. So while it's not a immediate threat, right, it could be a threat in the future if somebody swaps out this dependency as a poisoning attack. There's also the problem of authentication. Luckily, we have Aaron from Auth0 who presented in the main MCP summit in person, talking about this in a lot more detail. So MCP now has an official OAuth spec, but the problem still remains where if you have a lot of different MCPs, how do you manage all these keys, right? How do you manage the authentication for all of these different services? And lastly, I think this is perhaps a more speculative part of the MCP ecosystem or a specification. It's like, how do we get agents to pay for stuff on my behalf? So if we imagine like MCP as the main way for agents to talk to different services, they will probably have to transact on our behalf, right? So what would a future look like with a bunch of microtransactions? Okay, now I want to switch gears and talk about the developer side of the problem. So I've spoken about a lot of the different problems you might face if you are an MCP user. But if you're an MCP developer, there's a whole host of problems as well. So imagine you're developing an MCP, you're a service vendor. The first challenge you face is probably developer tooling. We have this official inspector from Anthropic, from MCP, which is not bad. It gives you basic like curl-like abilities to test out the endpoints of your MCP. but it doesn't really tell you like how an agent would use your MCP, which is really what you want to be testing, right? Um, and so once you develop your MCP, right? Let's say you figured that part out. Now you got to deal with hosting, right? Thanks to Streamable HTTP, it's been a lot easier to host MCPs compared to the previous SSE version of the protocol. But hosting is still a challenge because as a developer, you have to deal with stateful sessions. You have to consider resumability. There are a lot of quirks with shipping the MCP that is not really the same as a traditional REST API. Okay, so now you figured out hosting and you develop your MCP. So now you're ready to launch. And you launch your MCP. And 1 week later, what happens? Okay, you get 42 different tool calls on your MCP. So that's not bad, but now what? How do you kind of make your tool calls better, right? How do you make your MCP behave in a way where the agents would use it in its correct form, right? So those are open questions. And how do you distribute your MCP, right? How do you get your MCP out there? If you post it just on GitHub or Reddit, it's unlikely an agent would find your MCP. And once you do get your MCP used by agents, right? What's happening in production, right? There's no tooling right now to observe what's happening. And I want to highlight that for observability, I think one interesting thing is what we really want here is semantic observability, not just traditional kind of how many 200s, how many 400s and 500s you're getting, but like what are the agents using your MCP for, right? And I think all this ties back into, in general, we want to try to create a good agent experience because agent experience is the new user experience, right? We're no longer creating services for users, we're creating it for agents. And as an example of agent experience, I want to call out, I'm a big fan of Notion, but I will have to dunk on their MCP a little bit here, and I'm sure they will improve it. This MCP is looks like one where somebody took an open API spec and kind of translated it into MCP, right? And this is not the right way to like create a very high quality MCP for agents because agents are going to read this and they will probably get confused. So we need much higher quality descriptions and higher sort of specification maturity when it comes to implementing MCPs. And we had to think about the agent experience in mind when developing them. Okay, so now you develop your MCP. You got so imagine you have like a great developer, great agent experience, right? Now you had to worry about monetization. So this is sort of the other side of the equation when it comes to payments, right? As a developer, like how do you receive payments for your MCP? Do you charge people subscriptions, right? Like traditional SaaS applications, or do you want to charge them by tool calls, right? So I think that's also an interesting open question. Okay, so in summary, I think we have a bunch of ecosystem problems. On the demand side, we have quality, we have installation, packaging, security, authentication, and payments. On the developer side, we have tooling issues, right? We have hosting issues. Distribution is also a challenge. Observability, is not really there yet, and monetization and payments in general are sort of an open question. So obviously, here's this is a good chance for me to give a plug for myself and Smithery. I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be that way, right? So our mission here, Smithery, is to orchestrate all these AI native services for AI agents and to solve and tackle a lot of these problems that I presented today. So far, as a pretty early startup, we've only scratched the surface of some of these problems I mentioned. But here's a little demo to showcase what you can build when some of these problems are solved. So what you're seeing here is the Smithery Playground, which is a new feature that we're releasing onto our website. The Smithery Playground is a place where, as a developer or someone exploring MCPs, we want you to be able to visualize how an agent uses your MCP and how it would call the tools there. So for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to show you a sort of workflow, a potential workflow you might want to build. So let me just submit this prompt here. So this agent is connected to Smithery, the registry, and it's able to access all the tools that are available and published on Smithery. So what I'm doing here is I'm asking the agent to do a complex set of tasks. First, it has to examine Notion, right? It has to read my Notion. It has to extract insights from some customer interviews I've been doing. So you can imagine a product manager needing to extract some insights about their users. Then I want this agent to go check my GitHub, and I wanted to look at the current issues. And then the third step is do some deep research on the web based on these things it has learned so far. And finally, I wanted to create a task on my linear based on what it has learned so far. So let me just run down what's happening here, because a lot of things are happening. This is sort of an attempt to do a bunch of different tasks in one shot. First, what you'll notice is that like this agent here is able to connect to a bunch of different MCPs because it can discover it through Smithery's registry. Once it connects to these MCPs, it's able to search for it, search for different things within the MCPs. It's able to read within the MCPs, and finally, it's able to take action on my behalf and create this linear ticket here. So it says, you can view or track the task here called synthesize customer interview insights. So okay, let me go on my linear and see if I can. Okay, I guess I need to sign in here, but okay, so I'm going to sign into my linear, and let's see if I can find this. Okay, so we have this task here, synthesize customer interviews. So yeah, it has successfully created this issue on my linear. So that's about a short demo. It kind of just showcases what type of agent you can build if you're able to connect a bunch of different services together and have a good orchestration of these different services. So I'm going to go back to the slide. Okay. So before I wrap up sort of this demo and talk, I want to talk a little bit about what the prototype I just showed you is doing and how that leads to a potentially agentic future. So imagine an AI agent that has secure access to your email, calendar, documents, and so on. It's no longer trapped in a silo, right? It's embodied and is woven into a unified understanding of your life. When you go out and say, prepare me for the next week, it doesn't just list your meetings, right? Research does its research on attendees. It prepares briefing notes, right? It orders supplies for your trip and so on, even drafts potential emails that you've been putting off. This is an agent that is able to kind of know everything you know and is able to do things on your behalf securely and accomplish your intents. But I think the interesting thing is once we have sort of the rails to run this agent, right? This agent won't just know you; it can learn from your experience, right? Every task you complete, every preference you observe, every recovery from failure that it makes could potentially make it smarter. And I think this is what Richard Sutton is alluding to in his paper, The Era of Experience, right? An era where AI agents can finally learn not just from the past era of human data, but from this upcoming era where it generates its own data and experience. So I kind of want to end on this slogan that we've been developing at Smithery, which is like, which I think we're witnessing a fundamental shift in the internet's economy, one in which tool calls are becoming the new clicks. And in today's kind of landscape, we see a lot of AI apps. We have Harvey, Legal, Jasper, Marketing, and so on. As AI agents get more general, my bet is that like we're going to have vertical apps perhaps start to consolidate. And that doesn't mean there's no specialization anymore, right? There's still specialization. It's just that these specializations will kind of shift to the back end. We'll have thousands of AI native service apps powering broad agentic behavior. AI native services are becoming the default interface between a vendor and a user. So just as businesses had to go online in 2000s or go mobile in the 2010s, I think what we're going to see is AI native services becoming a dominant thing in the remaining 2020s. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Henry, great job. Really interesting presentation, and thanks for sharing a little bit of sort of the journey you guys have been on. I had one question for you, which was about, you talked there about, the approach that someone like Notion has taken, where they've taken an open API and they've kind of mapped it to an MCP and published. And you guys probably more than anybody know how frequently that's the case, that the MCP, by the time you go to try to use it, is really it's pretty far from an optimized service when you get to one. If that's the wrong approach, where should a developer go to figure out the right approach? Like who's guiding people towards the right approach? Is there one resource you would point to and say like, yes, read this, do this, because damn it, we can't just keep slapping MCPs in front of APIs and having crappy experiences for people consuming them.
So I think we're still pretty early in the ecosystem journey, right? So if, obviously like part of what we're doing at Smithery is trying to build out the developer tooling to help all these developers figure out how to create a high quality MCP. I think creating a high quality MCP is very much like prompt engineering, right? So it's not too different from prompt engineering, except you're doing tool engineering, right? You're trying to engineer tools so the agent can call it in the best way possible. So I think there's not a lot of dedicated resources today on building high quality MCPs, but I think the closest thing we have is a lot of resources on how to create good agents in general, and a lot of principles from creating good agents, like doing evals, right? Writing high quality evals and then running agents on these evals and then doing iterative improvements. I think those are principles that will transfer over to the MCP world.
Awesome. Well, maybe as you guys make progress on that area and you end up with a guide to building MCPs that don't suck, I would love to have you back to show that. But otherwise,
awesome.
Thank you so much, man. It was great, and really appreciate you taking the time to talk to everybody today.
Awesome. Thank you.